Okay. Um, Here's what you know, kind of somewhat a finished animation might look like. Maybe 22 frames. Um, just basically to show you some of the components. This down here, this is the amount of time that a frame shows itself for. Okay. And that is changeable. Generally, when you want something to run smoothly, like this, right? You want everything to read 0. But if I was playing this, and let's say instead of playing it once, I'm going to play it continuously. If I was playing this again and again, I might want that last frame with the type to last a little bit longer. So what you would do is change this maybe to 5 seconds, right? And then every time it plays, it'll play the same way. Stay there for 5 seconds, then start again. You got it? Okay. Don't worry about anything else yet. I'm going to get to showing you other things. Um, Basically, the layers are really important. The layers kind of, they don't equate with the frames, but it's really important with the layers that you have things turned off when you're not using them. And it's very important that you know what you're doing kind of before you do it. You can use a lot more layers than I'm using here. It depends on what you're doing. But I'm going to go through and kind of show you what I did here very simply. All right. So, first of all, I have this layer. Okay. Let's delete the animation and start it again. Okay. So I have this layer, which is just me. Then I did a kind of a quick version of that without the background. And I just, you know, used the blob tool and just took it out real quick, used a little bit of a feather on it. Then I've got another background here, okay? And then I've got type. Got it? All right. I want to get, let me get, I want to get to the beginning of this. Let me close this window because that's important. When you go up here to start an animation, it's important, right? You go to timeline. It's not going to say frames. It's going to say timeline. Open that up. Now, I've already done frames once, but you will see a button that says timeline animation. And if you press and hold it, it will also give you a choice of frame animation. You choose frame animation, and then you've got to push this button right next to it. Okay? But that's an important first step, because if you're on the timeline window, nothing will make any sense. All right? So this is how I'm going to start. I'm going to start with this layer on, this layer off. This layer can be on. It doesn't really matter. So I can just leave it on the whole time. The type will be off. Now watch how simple this is. Okay? The first thing I'm going to do is create a new frame. Okay, this is the new frame button right here. So I'm going to create a new frame and turn layer 2 on. All right. That's layer 2. The thing is about layer 2 is at this point, I want it to be at 0 opacity. So I'm going to change it to 0. Okay, so I turned the frame on and separate it from frame 1 because in frame 2, layer 2 is turned on. That's what makes it different, even though you can't see it. Okay. Also, the position of the frame, you can see that image in layer 2 is larger. It has more width, much more width. That's what enables me to move it. So if this is like 20, I don't know, I don't remember how big it is, but let's say this is 2,500 pixels. The image in layer 2 is like 6,000 pixels, which enables me to move it, almost like a pan or like the sky is moving behind me. You have to have a larger image so that you have room to do that. Now, I'm going to put this recording up on the board too, so that you can see the step-by-step afterwards. But so we want a frame that looks like this. 0 opacity with the frame being in this position. Then I'm going to create a new frame. And in this frame, we're going to go to 100% opacity. And we're going to change the position so that it's moved all the way in the other direction. Okay, so we have this frame, everything's in that state. This frame, it's in this state. How do you get the animation to happen? It's simple. It's called tweening. And tweening is right here. This basically interpolates frames between frames. So I'm going to click the tween button, and you'll see we want to tween with the previous frame, because we want to go from 0 to 100%, but we want frames showing that change. Instead of it just being 2 frames, 1 0, one's 100%, we're going to have Photoshop interpolate the frames with the opacity and with the position change. These are basically the things that you can, do, change within a frame animation. So I'm going to add 10 frames. Okay. Click OK. And it takes care of itself. It is fading in while it's changing position. So basically what you have at this point is that. All right. Pretty simple. Pretty simple. Okay, so we're going to go back to frame 13, right? And now I'm going to create a new frame to start the type fade in. Now, this is what's important. You don't want this to be on. You don't want the layer to be on, while you're doing other stuff. And it can get very confusing because if you have this open and you're working and going back and forth between different frames, you, without knowing it, you can completely mess up your animation, because basically each frame, not the interpolated frames, but the other frames, are a recording, in a sense, of the state of the layers. So if I had this layer with the type on and I hadn't done anything yet, it would be showing in all these frames. And the way I would have to undo that is I can't just turn it off and it'll change all those frames. No, I'd have to go back into each frame and make that change. Or you can shift select and do a bunch of frames at once. But it gets very tricky. So don't turn layers on until you're using them. Okay, so I'm going to create a new frame, right? Now I'm going to turn this layer on, turn the opacity to 0. Right? And this should be on also, but it's not. Well, let's delete that frame. Yes. Let's go back to this frame. And turn it on here. So my last frame, I'm going to turn the type on, turn it down to 0 opacity. Oh, I'm on the wrong layer. Thank you. Turn it down to 0 opacity. Then create a new frame. Change it to 100%. And you could do movement in the same time too, or a scale change, or anything else that you wanted to do. Okay. Now it's between these two frames that the change happens. So you have this frame, 0%, this frame, 100%. So you can tween with either frame. If I go to the first frame, right, go to the tween button, and I tween with the next frame in this case. And we don't have to do 10 layers. Let's do 6. Click OK. And there's our 6 layers. Okay. That's basically a frame animation. Now, I might as well show you. You can save this. Let's go to say, well, I already saved it once. So where is it? Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. So under format, CompuServe, GIF, you can save it this way. Then it's going to ask you usually a couple of questions. I already have one saved that size. But how many colors? I mean, save it with the most colors at this point. Black and white, primaries, web, custom. You would just do web probably. And you don't have to worry about the options. This is a really simple way of saving it, okay? Now, the other way to save something like this, particularly if it's for the web, is go to export, save for web, which is a legacy feature, what they call a legacy feature, which means it's old and they don't really want to put it in there, but they do. And you can look close up and see what it looks like. Like if I take the number of colors down to 16, I should get a preview. It's previewing. There's the difference. Big difference. Okay. But that makes it smaller and it'll run easier when it's downloaded. It downloads quicker. But, you know, this isn't that long. And it isn't that, well, actually, I made it pretty large. Yeah. It's like 7.5 megabytes. which is pretty large. So when I do 256, yeah, that's pretty large. You can, the dither is at 51%, which is kind of ideal. Anything over 50% is. 256 colors. Yeah. In some cases, you might be able to get away with half that, 128. But I doubt very many people will get away with 64 colors. Okay. And you can even preview this, how it would look. It may take a while on this computer because I have so many things open. There's a page. You can see how big that is. It's like a bigger than a full web page. But I wanted you to see something that large actually works. Okay. So you can do it that large. You can do it much smaller. You can have two different sizes so that you have a small one optimized. You saw mine took a little bit of time to upload. You can do a smaller one, just save it smaller, and then have an original that's much larger. And then you can hit save. When you hit done, that just means you're done for now, that you don't need this window. Save means you're saving a copy that's optimized. Here's the image size, which, like I said, is pretty large. I'm just off of not quite a square, but that's pretty large for GIF. And you can do it a lot smaller than that. You can also just do a rendering at, like, let's fill in 50%, hit return. It's taking a little bit of time. But 50% of the size, you can see now it's 1,000 by like 800. The GIF is a lot smaller, and instead of 28 seconds to load, it's loading it in 12 seconds. Okay. Now, any questions? I mean, as you get into this, look, here's the thing. Almost everybody screws this up when they're doing it because they forget you gotta have layers turned off when you're not using them. And what happens ultimately is the first time you're building a frame animation, you get things in frames where you don't want them. And it's because of your process. You have to turn on frames only as you need them. But if I turn on a frame, and let's say it's for frame 20 and forward, but then I go back to frame 10 and change something, guess what happens? Yeah, you just messed up frame 10. So it's a process that has its limitations, but is also very simple. And you just kind of have to get to understand what it is. It's very easy to do a simple animation, and you could literally, if you follow my demonstration, do this in like a couple hours. Seriously. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So are we limited to Photoshop as our only tool, or are we open to other applications?
What's that again?
Are we limited to Photoshop as our only tool, or are we open to other applications?
Yeah, I think if you want to take this idea and run with it, and you just want to have fun and do like a little self-portrait animation in After Effects or something else that you know, it's probably not going to be a frame animation, more likely a timeline animation. But if you know how to do that, it means you're kind of past the point of frame animation. So it's fine with me. It just means kind of like you're beyond this point and you can kind of do something more on your level. So the short answer is yes. Okay.
Thank you. I have another question. Can I also ask?
What's that?
I have another question. Can I also ask?
Yes.
The final format, does it have to be a GIF, or can it be a like a video file format?
Yeah, I don't mind if it's, as long as it's universal, something like MOV or, um, an MPEG, something that you know, and again, um, just make sure it's a pretty universal format. But I mean, as long as if you output like an MPEG 4, I mean, that wouldn't be any problem. There's some
Thank you.
formats, yeah, there's some formats that can be a problem, but you probably know what you should and shouldn't use. So I think, yeah, you can. But for everybody else, I mean, if you're doing this and a frame animation in Photoshop, stick to a GIF. And the legacy save for web is the best way to save it. Gives you the most choices. Any other questions? No? Okay, I'm going to, first of all, where I keep losing that. Okay, so I'm going to stop.